Well, it looks like it is 1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm assuming we're all on the same time zone, but good morning if some of you are on a different time zone. My name is Dr. Demicha Rankin, and I'm the Associate Dean for the Ohio State University College of Medicine, and I would like to welcome you to our question and answer session, as well as an informational session. Today, we will be together for about an hour. And it is going to be jam-packed with lots of good information, as well as an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. I know that some questions have been submitted already, and we hope to work through all of those. I do want to make a disclaimer that this session, the intent of it is to be able to provide general information about the admissions process, specifically related to Ohio State, and that I will not be answering any questions related to your personal application. So with that, I also would like to acknowledge our Director for Admissions, Ms. Julie Brim, who will also be helping to provide some fantastic information to you guys as well as a shout out to Nicole, who is our woman behind the scenes, helping to make sure all of this happens in an efficient and technical manner. So we'll go ahead and get started. So here's the agenda. We're going to talk about, obviously, Ohio State, and of course, I'm going to toot our own horn. I should probably tell you guys that I have a bias in that I am a tried and true Buckeye. I've done all of my training here. I am an anesthesiologist by training, and so undergrad, med school, residency, and on faculty. So yes, I believe in the Buckeye spirit and opportunities and culture. So there that is. And so we'll talk to you guys today a little bit about applying to Ohio State, some of the changes that we have encountered as a result of COVID, and we'll talk about requirements and recommended work. We'll talk about how to improve your application on a more broad scale, and then we'll have an opportunity for question and answer. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I'm going to share this video with you guys. This is what our students have to say.
Growing up in a small Appalachian town in Byesville, Ohio, I always wanted to go to Ohio State. Once I made the decision that I wanted to go to medical school, I'm like, man, I would love to go to Ohio State.
Within being here just a few months, I felt like I already had a network and a family, quickly became a Buckeye.
Coming here on interview day,
Sorry about that.
Growing up in a small Appalachian town in Byesville, Ohio, I always wanted to go to Ohio State. Once I made the decision that I wanted to go to medical school, I'm like, man, I would love to go to Ohio State.
Within being here just a few months, I felt like I already had a network and a family, quickly became a Buckeye.
Coming here on interview day, I was just blown away by all the fantastic people, the friendliness, the community here, the diversity here. So all of those things attracted me to OSU.
I chose Ohio State's College of Medicine due to the diversity of the student body as well as the faculty. In addition to the curriculum, really getting us into the hospital setting early on so that we could start to apply some of the skills that we gained during our first and second years.
There's numerous opportunities to grow, not only as a student, but as a future professional. I've been doing some procedures that usually first years do not get to do until they're in rotations in third year.
I love the interactions of not only teaching from the faculty and staff, but the mentorship. Whether you want group mentorship or one-on-one interaction with faculty and staff, it's available.
I have physician faculty to look up to who emulate those values of compassionate, humanistic patient care. I felt that there was an emphasis not just on becoming competent physicians, but being humanistic physicians that understand what matters to our patients and how we can benefit not just the individual, but our communities as a whole.
Everybody's just so collaborative. It's really a team effort. Really, I'm super happy with the collaboration among my peers and myself.
People here are proud to be at Ohio State, part of this culture of being a Buckeye.
So if you are thinking, I want that family feel, I want those close connections, I want those relationships, those personal connections with the people, look no farther than Ohio State. You found it, open yourself up to the idea, and I'm sure that you'll be grateful for it.
A couple of disclaimers there. Number one, we didn't let her do any procedures that were not approved and not without guidance, but it is pretty awesome to be able to get into the clinic early. And I should comment that the space that the students were actually in is one of the classrooms in the old building because we are currently building a new medical school. So you guys are considering medical school at the perfect time. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about Ohio State. I know some of you are maybe undergraduate students here, but I think it is important to really appreciate the gem that you have in your own backyard. We have over 800 residents and fellows with more than 1,500 faculty physicians on staff. And so we have James Cancer Hospital, the Ross Hart Hospital, several hospitals within our campus. And so we really have been serving as leaders in different areas within medicine. And I think I have a slide about that too. There are more than 23,000 staff. We have a designation of being a magnet hospital, designated hospital. This is a prestigious accomplishment. We do have 7 health sciences colleges on a single campus, which is very unique to our school. Not many schools have that. So the ability for collaboration is simply abundant. And of course, we have a very large alumni society. So you're always going to run into a Buckeye somewhere. Next slide, please. In terms of national rankings, I know that this is something that students often consider and go to. We are ranked number 33 in terms of research. Now, there are over 150 different medical schools for which, again, being 33 is a significant accomplishment. We're ranked number 28 in primary care. And so this is according to the US News and World Report 2022 reports. And so this is, again, yet an outstanding testament that our education, patient care, and research all translate into tangible, palpable results that are affecting our communities, which is something we're very proud of. Next slide, please. In terms of the class profile, because I know you guys are probably interested in this, as for our entering class of 2020, because we haven't, which started in 2020, we haven't solidified the data for this year just yet, but we tend to attract a good portion of out-of-state students. 47% were from not within Ohio and 53% were Ohio residents. The average GPA for the matriculating class was 3.8 and the average MCAT was 515. And I'll just pause right there and say that I said that these are averages, which means that there are students that are both above these numbers as well as below. In terms of diversity in our class, we have been serving as leaders when it comes to educating women, as well as educating those individuals that are numerically underrepresented in medicine. And so our class was 22% individuals that, again, are underrepresented in medicine. And then you can see we do have the designations broken down into Black, African American, Latinx, as well as Native Americans. And so 53% of the class was women. And we also have some students that do not identify with male or female, non-binary. So we truly do value diversity in all shapes and forms, geographic, identification, race, ethnicity, because excellence is rooted in having diversity present. Next slide, please. In addition, it's important to highlight that there are many paths that you guys can take to get to your MD. We have a traditional MD admissions, which is 4-year, where that's the typical 4-year curriculum. We also have a 3-year primary care track. And this is actually a gem because you get your MD, but when you apply to the primary care track, you actually are combining your medical school application along with your residency. Your residency is the time that you have to spend after medical school to basically validate that you are a physician. And so students accepted into this track are automatically matched into our family medicine program. So this is a fantastic program for those of you who are really passionate about being a primary care physician. We also have dual degree programs, and we also have our MD PhD program. So those students that are thriving and desiring to be physician scientists, this is the path for you. You don't have to know that you want a dual degree because you can actually make that declaration once you're a medical student here and understand that we have all of the options for dual degrees. If you want to become a lawyer while becoming a doctor, if you want to get your master's in public health, or if you want to get your MBA, you have that ability to do so at our university and at our College of Medicine. Next slide, please. Again, I want to touch again on the diversity in the class. I mentioned that 22% of the incoming class for last year came from underrepresented areas in terms of being in medicine. We were voted the 7th most diverse medical school by US News and World Report, which is a significant accomplishment. And this is the highest ranking among top 40 research schools. More than 50% of our women, more than 50% of our class have been women for at least the past 8 years. And then leadership is represented very well by our women faculty. Next slide. So again, just to toot our own horn again, ranked number 1 in Columbus, Ohio. We have 8 adult specialties that are nationally ranked when it comes to our hospital care. We are the 3rd largest cancer hospital in the nation, which again, to have this in your own backyard, not only does it give you, the student, opportunities for learning and research, but really an opportunity to become ultra specialized. We have a freestanding heart hospital. So patients that come in that are having that heart attack, they don't have to go to a general hospital, they're going to our cardiothoracic hospital. 3rd largest pediatric hospital and research center in the United States over at our nationwide children's hospital. Brain and spine community hospital on the Near East Side. We have behavioral health and mental health hospital, which is a freestanding facility, as well as rehab. And of course, we have a new hospital that is in the process of being built, and that will probably be finished in 2024. So it's going to be more than 800 beds in this new facility. Next slide, please. And so with that, I will turn it to Julie to talk about how to apply to our College of Medicine.
Thanks, Dr. Rankin. And hi, everyone. I'm Julie Brim. I am the Director of Admissions here at the College of Medicine. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our application timeline. This next year's application is about to open up. It actually is open right now and you can start entering it, and you can enter right around June 1st. I think it's May 27th this year. And then the deadline for all applications and transcripts to be received by AMCAS, which is this is the American Medical College Application Service. Think of it as kind of like the Common App, but for medical school. That happens on November 1st. And here at Ohio State, you have until then to request your secondary from us. And then on December 15th, that's our deadline where you have to have submitted your secondary. And again, similar to the Common App, those secondaries are school specific. And then along the way, you attach your evaluation letters, but in September through March, that is when we do our interview days. We interview every Monday and Wednesday for that period of time. And then we notify people every 2 weeks, starting in about October. We operate on rolling admissions. So we admit people every 2 weeks through the next spring. Next slide, please. Okay, application changes due to COVID-19. So we tried to be really thoughtful this last year. Clearly, that was an unexpected event. So we, along with most medical schools, decided that we would play things by ear and try to remain very flexible for applicants to reduce stress. So again, for this coming cycle, our interview cycle will be virtual. So for those of you that are applying this year, actually can save you a lot of money because you can interview right from your own living room. And then what we'll do is offer in-person tours throughout the season as the university and state guidelines allow. We also last year allowed people to take prerequisite courses pass-fail during spring of 2020 and any of their classes, but also including prerequisites, which we had never done before. And again, for spring and summer, allowed people to take online coursework for labs. So we could help out everyone and they didn't lose a semester. And then another adjustment we made was letters of evaluation. You're required to have one letter to Ohio State that is from someone that graded you in a science course. But if that was a course that you took in spring 2020 and that was pass-fail, we allowed that as well. Next slide, please. So, and then in terms of MCAT and deadlines, this year, our dates, you do need to have an actual valid MCAT to receive a secondary. So if you are applying in this year's cycle, your valid MCAT dates need to be between January 1st of 2018 and September 30th of this coming year in 2021. And then again, like I mentioned before, the deadline to request our secondary is November 1st, and the deadline to complete it is December 15th. Next slide, please. Okay, prerequisites. Let's talk a little bit about what we require. We do require 1 semester or quarter, if you're on a school that is in quarters, you're not in Ohio State, a semester of biochemistry. We require 1 year of biology. We require a year of general chemistry, and that consists of the coordinating labs. Organic chemistry, again, a year of organic chemistry with coordinating labs, and a year of physics with that same laboratory experience. Next slide. Okay, so in addition to that, there's some other things we recommend you take. They're not required, but they're going to be very useful when you take the MCAT and for medical school. So anatomy, it's not one of our requirements anymore, but always a great course to take. A writing or a speech course that emphasizes that written or verbal communication. All the social sciences, psychology and sociology, especially for that section of the MCAT that is about the social determinants of health. That's very helpful. Humanities are great, just for the obvious reasons, lots of different things. Take a class about diversity that focuses on another culture or history or circumstances with different populations. And then ethics is also always a great course to take that address issues related to moral behavior, meta-ethics, psychology, things like that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the primary MCAS application, let's talk about the different pieces. There is a personal statement, and that's where your essay is going to be entered, where you tell us why you want to be a physician. There's also letters of recommendation. At Ohio State, we require 2 letters. One of them needs to be from a science professor that graded you, and then you can have another one. Most people have, I'd say, anywhere from 3 to 7. And if for some reason you're not at Ohio State and you're at a school that just has a committee letter, we will accept just that committee letter. And then you're also going to have spaces to enter up to 15 separate experiences. You're going to put in things like your leadership, research, community service, shadowing, all those things. And then also in your primary MCAS application are all of your post-secondary grades from verified transcripts. So that includes, if you took any college credit plus in high school, everything that's on a transcript gets included.
Hey, Julie, I will jump in here because I'm not sure if anyone else has seen the dancing Miss Julie Brim, but she really is not glitching like that. So I'll take it from here. We're going to talk about how to make your application shine. Yeah, so it's almost like, what is that? There was a cartoon guy, and it just escaped me, but the little figure would glitch. Am I dating myself? Okay, yes, I am probably. I have 2 kids and I'm not watching these cartoons by myself, okay? So let's talk about how to make your application shine. Next slide, please. Wreck-It Ralph, that's what it was. Okay, personal statement. This is our first impression of you. And let me say that this is probably my best part or my most enjoyable aspect of the application, because yes, we need to review your transcript and all your letters of recommendation, but this really gives us our first impression of you. And so it needs to be well thought out. Give yourself time to prepare your personal statement. Expect that you're going to go at least through 3 different drafts, okay? And so do not get a professional writing company to write it for you, okay? Do not plagiarize, okay? And really speak to why you want to become a physician. What has inspired you? And what kind of person you are, and what type of qualities do you have that lend itself to being the type of physician that you want to be? So please, spend the time with this. Most often we see woven themes into your personal statements. For instance, if someone has been a swimmer, or someone has played a musical instrument, or had some travel abroad experience that has really influenced them, please be sure to just don't tell me about the experience, yes, but make sure you tell me how that experience has influenced your decision to become a physician. Again, have a trusted advisor. Have your mom read it, or your dad read it, or another trusted adult. Get their honest feedback and be ready to receive it. Now, not all feedback has to be receiving, and we want to make sure it describes who you are, but just be ready to get some honest feedback about it. Do not list simply items from your CV, because we already will see you'll have an opportunity to line those things up. And also I would avoid bringing up controversial subjects. Now, what does that mean? You want to avoid possibly insulting someone that is reading this. Like, to bring up the death penalty is a very risky thing to do in a personal statement. And to say that, yes, I am all for the death penalty, that would be a controversial topic, and it's not something you would want to do in your personal statement. But I think there are creative ways to talk about controversial subjects, especially into the past year and a half. There's been a lot of movement and talk and discussion about inequities. And so if you want to talk about those, I would encourage you to do so, but just be thoughtful in how you approach it. Next slide, please. Letters of evaluation. Again, Julie mentioned having 2 letters is our minimum. One of them, again, has to be from someone that taught you in a science course. And also, sometimes we get letters of recommendations from coaches for those individuals that may have been collegiate athletes, individuals that have long-term volunteer service and they get their supervisor to write them a letter. So there are lots of opportunities for you to consider individuals to write you a letter. Do not ask a friend. Do not ask your parent if they are a physician and they're your parent and they are a physician. Don't ask them to write you a letter of recommendation because, quite frankly, their perspective of you is going to be biased. They're going to say you're fantastic, because I don't think I've ever seen a letter that wouldn't say that from a parent, even though I haven't seen letters from parents in any case. And when you ask this individual to get you a letter, you should provide guidance to them on what they should talk about. I think you're not trying to give them a script, but you also want them to highlight those characteristics about you that they are able to speak to: your time management skills, your commitment, your ability to troubleshoot a research project, your compassion, your critical thinking. Those things are the items that should come across in your letters of evaluation. Next slide. I do have a couple of examples of some not so good letters that we have seen in the past. This is an example of a short letter that is not supportive. I have known blank for 5 years. They took 5 biology courses and also conducted research with me in my laboratory. Performance was adequate. This is not supportive. The fact that they did research and they can't speak positively about the research doesn't add confidence into selecting this candidate for an interview. Please feel free if you want additional information. That's not so helpful. Here's another letter, which is a little bit longer, but the first paragraph just talks about the class. It doesn't even talk about the student. They're writing this letter for this person who is applying to medical school. They were a student in this class, and this class has this many students in it, and this is what we learned. Then they talk about how this individual earned an A. Well, that is admirable. But then they go on to say that she occasionally came to the office hours for discussions. This person, I read this as this person was offended that this person did not actually meet in person to ask for the letter of recommendation. And I point this out because understand the individuals that you guys are asking to write letters are not of your same generation, and they are used to having face-to-face discussions. And so to ask someone via text or email to write a letter of recommendation can be or may be perceived as impersonal. So even if you do it in Zoom, with some restrictions, I think that could be welcome to have a discussion about writing a letter. And when you ask someone to write your letter, you want to ask them, can you write me a good letter? You want to give individuals an opportunity to avoid giving something like this letter or the first letter. Next letter example, please. So this letter is a little bit better, but it's not glowing as some other letters that we've seen. So this talks about how this student was in the physics class. Again, it talks more about the basis of the class. It talks about these courses are quite demanding. And then they talk about how this student got a grade, puts them in the top 11%. He would occasionally attend office hours and ask questions about material, demonstrated good understanding. Based on his very good performance in my course, they provide a strong recommendation. This doesn't speak anything about his work ethic, timeliness, communication skills, none of those things. So this is, again, not a good example of a letter. So be thoughtful in who you guys consider for writing letters of evaluation, and give them plenty of time. Expect at least 4 to 6 weeks turnaround time, okay? Because a lot of these professors are busy with classes and things. And so you want them to have time to write you a good, strong letter. Next slide, please. In terms of the selection process, I think it is important for you guys to understand how we process applications. We use what is called holistic review. And so what this means is that we give equal weighting to your experiences, the attributes that you have, and your metrics, okay? So if you do not have experiences that demonstrate a commitment to want to serve others, have healthcare experiences, research, and if you don't have the skills of communication, compassion, and empathy, it doesn't matter if your GPA is a 4.0, and it doesn't matter if your MCAT score is perfect. You wouldn't be a student that we would consider desirable for our curriculum. Now, I can't speak for other medical schools, but we definitely we approach it with it takes more than just good grades to be a physician. You have to have some of those other characteristics. And so when we get our application, again, last year we got over 8,000 applications for 200 spots. So it is a very, very competitive field. We get all of our applications. Our applications then go to our screeners, and they review your application in total and make a recommendation. And so we invite approximately 600 students from that pool. And this is, again, just for the regular MD. We still have our MSTP and our primary care track that you guys can apply to. And then once you're invited for an interview, you're interviewed by the admissions committee, and then we make either a decision to offer you acceptance, place you on a wait list, and very rarely do we reject any students at this level. To be rejected at our institution, you would kind of have to really just do like a face plant on your interview day, which usually does not happen. Once you make it to that point, students are usually can keep it together. So next slide, please. Julie?
Can everybody see me and hear me?
Yes.
Gosh, that was quite an ordeal. Okay. Yeah, I could see myself glitching, but didn't know if everybody else could see it. Okay, let's talk about your experiences. So something very important to remember, we want you to pursue opportunities you're interested in. Don't do things for your application because you think it's what we want to see. Do the things you're passionate about. So for healthcare related activities, volunteering in free clinics, shadowing or working at a hospital or ERs, volunteering at a homeless clinic or extended care facilities are all really great experiences. Leadership, you want to demonstrate that in a work, community, or school organization. Leadership doesn't have to have a president or a secretary or a title to go with it. You know, if you lead your church choir, if you lead a dance troupe, that's still leadership even without a title that goes with it. Community service and volunteerism, being a hospice volunteer is a great thing to do because it encompasses healthcare related and it's also volunteerism. You can be an emergency med tech, work as a hospital scribe. That's a really excellent kind of all-encompassing activity that you can do. And research, we look for research as well. And of course, being a research assistant is a great way to get that experience. Next slide, please. Okay, attributes, what we're looking for in candidates. We are looking for people that have great communication skills, collegiality. Ohio State is a very collegial environment. Once you get into medical school, you're not competing with the person that's sitting next to you. We're all trying to raise our level. So it's not a cutthroat environment at all. We're looking for examples of persistence and resilience, things that you overcame in your life. We're looking for compassion, for service orientation. I always tell people being a physician is living your life in service to other people. So if you're not a service-oriented person, you're probably not going to like being a doctor very much. We're also looking for examples of critical thinking. Next slide, please. Okay, and then metrics, that third item, GPA, things to remember, everything counts. So like I mentioned, that college credit plus course that you took as a sophomore, that counts also. And in terms of your MCAT, we see all of them. So if you do take the MCAT more than once, it's not a problem, but we see all of them. It's not like the ACT or the SAT where you can choose which scores you want to send. But things to remember when you're preparing for the MCAT, first of all, prepare. It takes months to prepare for the MCAT. Be flexible in how you're preparing. Keep taking those practice tests. And if you don't see your score going up, be real honest with yourself about how you're preparing. Maybe it's not a way that's working for you. It might have worked for your friend, but maybe instead of taking a course, Khan Academy works for you, or question banks. And we do look at your highest score. We see all the scores, but the one that you have that's most recent is generally the one that we consider hopefully to be the most accurate. Next slide, please. Pitfalls. Okay, this is my favorite slide because these are things I want you all to remember. The biggest mistakes that people make when they apply to med school, one of them is not applying to enough medical schools. In this last cycle, the average matriculant, so the average person who got into medical school, applied to 17 schools. So it's not like undergraduate. You need to cast a wide net. If you have something that's a little weaker in your application, like say you maybe had fewer experiences, or maybe your grade point average wasn't as high, it should be 30 to 35. Yes, it's expensive, but I tell people applying twice is more expensive. So get ready and apply to lots of schools, cast a wide net, because there are so many applications in every school. Even if you're perfect in everything, it doesn't mean you're going to get an interview. Another one is not applying early enough, waiting too close to the deadline. I said you need to have your secondary in by December 15th, but when that application opens up and you're allowed to hit enter in June, ideally you hit enter as close to the beginning of the cycle as possible, because the more time that goes on, the more applications that every school has. So the faster you get in, the faster you get screened and move through the process. This is another big one, not seeking guidance or not following advice. So let's say you applied last year and you weren't successful and you went to your pre-health advisor or came to me and we said, this is what I would do. Follow that advice, even if that means taking the next cycle off or doing another gap year. If that's what's best for your application to make that application as great as it possibly can be, it's worth the wait. It's really just a blip on the radar when you think of your whole life. And along with that, reapplicants not waiting enough time to elapse for improvements for your candidacy to be apparent. So if you're a reapplicant and we're looking at your application, the first thing we're going to do is say, okay, what have they done since they applied the last time? Because if you just copy and paste and do everything the same, you're probably not going to be successful again. Along with that, say you had a lower GPA and you decided you need to go do a post-bac degree. Well, post-bacs start in the fall, so it doesn't make sense for you to apply right then because you want to show how much better you're going to do. We won't see any of your grades. So you need to wait long enough for those changes to actually happen. In terms of the MCAT, taking the MCAT before you're ready. When I said be flexible, if you're 2 weeks out from your test and you say to yourself, I'm not ready, then postpone. Better to wait and really feel ready than to take it and risk not doing as well as you would normally be able to do. And then along with that, repeating the MCAT without changing your process. If you didn't do well, but then you do the same thing again, you're probably not going to be as successful. Next slide, please.
So now I think we will open it up for questions. I know that there were some questions submitted before, and I've seen that there's some in the chat. Julie, do you have those questions?
I don't see, I lost them when I left, but I can see the most recent one, which says, do the science letters have to be from teachers who have professor status, or is it all right if they're a lecturer? It needs to be someone who graded you. So, I guess when you go to a school like Ohio State, you've probably had science courses with a lot of people. So if that means you're getting it from your TA, the person that actually interacted with you, then that's fine.
Okay, now I'm going to go over to the chat, and I think I see some questions. I think there was an MSTP question earlier.
Oh, it was about the length of time. If you can combine MSTP with PCT.
I guess I don't understand that question.
So in other words, could you shorten your, I'm assuming, could you shorten your 4-year curriculum into 3 years and still do your PhD?
The MSTP program is typically 7 years. Okay, so most students do first 2 years of medical school, and then they go away to do research, and then they come back and finish. So typically it's about 7 years. I guess it would be contingent upon the type of research and how much progression that you make. Maybe there could be some flexibility for finishing early, but typically the program is about 7 years.
Here's a good one about how many from the wait list later get an acceptance. The wait list is by no means the end. And if any of you out there have already applied to medical school and you're on a wait list, you are absolutely still very much in play, because people are on wait lists, someone gets taken off a wait list, and then that rolls all the way down. So we accept people really well into the summer. And you know, I accepted 2 people today, and I may accept someone again tomorrow. So you're absolutely still in play. So really your biggest hurdle, once you get an interview, that's your time to shine. And really the odds are with you from that point. The hardest part is to get the interview.
It says, how old can the letters of recommendation be? For instance, can someone use a letter written a year or 2 ago? I would say, while there is not a rule against the time and the date stamp, I would say it does reflect uncertainty in the application, in terms of this letter is 2 years old, what has happened in the interim, and there may be some concern raised. So I would discourage you from using a letter from 2 years ago. I think it is important to have an honest discussion with the individual that wrote the letter to see if they would be willing to provide a new letter with some updates, or a revised letter would be my recommendation. Because it's just going to cast doubt as to why is this letter 2 years old and what has happened in the interim.
Here's one. Is it okay to use AP credit to fulfill some of, I'm assuming you mean the prerequisites? It absolutely is. I will tell you though, that mostly your pre-health advisors here at Ohio State will tell you that even if you scored perfect on your AP Chem, that if you're going to be a science major, they'll often recommend that you take it again once you get to college. It's totally up to you. We have people that do both. It is probably to your advantage to take it again, but we do absolutely accept that from your prerequisites.
And I do see the hands raised, and I will get there. I'm just going to answer this next one. It says, hi, Dr. Rankin and Brim, Mrs. Brim. Does an MCAT taken later in the process in August affect rolling admissions, even if I finish all the other portions of the application? So you have a complete application once you have a valid MCAT score and your secondary applications are in. And so your application will not be moved from the application pile to the screening pile until that application is complete. Again, we do use rolling admissions. And so long as November 1st is the last time you can accept off a request a secondary. And then by December 15th, the cycle is essentially closed.
Yeah, and in fact, for Ohio State, because we require you to have a valid MCAT to get a secondary, if you were to apply to Ohio State before that MCAT score came in, you wouldn't get the secondary, and you'd have to go around the whole process again. Now, that's not to say when you submit your application, it takes 4 weeks for it to get verified. So there are people that literally go through every one of those courses and tick off everything and make sure it's perfect. So you don't need to wait until you get your MCAT score back to apply, because in those 4 weeks, your score and your application can catch up to one another. But make sure you know each school's parameters, because like I said, at Ohio State, we require an MCAT just to get a secondary. So if you hit us with that request before you have one, you would just get bounced right out.
And the other thing is too, last year, because the AAMC had encountered difficulties because of the viral pandemic, their turnaround time for scores had actually increased. So I have not seen any notifications about the turnaround time this year, but I suspect since they were able to do it last year, the turnaround time may be efficient this year too. So then we'll go to Lauren. Your question.
Oh, hello. To introduce myself, my name is Lauren Etzkorn. I'm going to be a fourth year biochem major here at Ohio State. And my question was just about, like in the video, they talked about community and humanistic focus of Ohio State College of Medicine's curriculum. Can you speak to a little bit about what students get involved in outside of the academics in order to, or even within the academics, in order to further that aspect of their professionalism and themselves?
I would say our students are involved in lots of community-based initiatives. We have over 92 student organizations. And in addition to the specialties that you're interested in, there are some of our student groups, heads up, actually go into the community, into middle school and high school to really expose those students to science and medicine. We also have one group, for instance, the Physicians for Human Rights, actually go into the prison population. And specifically, they target women that are pregnant within the prison population and really giving them tools and providing education. And quite frankly, there was one woman that they actually put together a book for the baby. So from education to healthcare, we have lots of free clinics that our students are involved in. And Lauren, I'm sorry because your hand went away. Oh, there you are. I see you on the screen. It is simply so awesome to see the work that our students do. And those are only just a couple of examples that just come to mind, but free clinics, going into the prison population, mental health specifically for children that are their parents were drug abusers. So they're really digging deep into the specialized population and finding ways to give back. So it is incredibly moving to see the work that our students do. So yes, thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer.
Nicole.
Hi, first, just thanks so much for hosting this info session. It's been really helpful for me to just kind of better understand the culture of the program, which I think is really difficult to grasp when you're just looking at a website. So my focus is mostly, I'm in public health right now. I'm getting my master's at University of Michigan. So sorry, but thanks for hosting me anyway. So I'm kind of interested in the primary care track and was wondering if for that application, or the sake of that application, if it would be advantageous for my personal statement to focus on primary care, or if it's okay if it's not directly applicable and I just demonstrate that interest in the supplementary and the secondary application. And just quickly after that, if PCT applications are rejected, are they able to be transferred to the regular MD program?
That's a great question. So I think in terms of when you are applying to any program, whether it's primary care tract or a physician scientist MSTP program, it is important to really lay out your desires in your personal statement. I think that if you're passionate about primary care, that needs to be clear throughout your entire application and not only in supplemental information. And if you're really passionate about research, it needs to be clear, not only in your experiences, but also in your personal statement. So that would be my recommendation there. Julie, you want to tackle the question about the process of their applications being bounced?
Yes. It's tough because we review all of them at the same time. So you're kind of going along aside, next to each other. So you are able to switch later in the season, but by the time you switch over, it's late. So we recommend that, if you want to do PCT, that's awesome, but make sure you really want to do it because that's the way your application is going. But along with that, just to follow up a little bit about your question, there's an additional essay that is for the primary care track that lets you kind of lay that out and talk about your interest a little bit more. And one of the things I normally talk about in Pitfalls that I didn't talk about before, and this fits in with our whole personal statement thing, the biggest mistake that people make on their personal statement is regurgitating their CV. We can see all of your experiences. You have tons of room to write about those experiences. Your personal statement should be a well-written story of that you want to be a doctor, why you want to be a doctor, and that it was well thought out. You don't have to feel like, oh, I did this and I did this and I did this, because we can see all that. And a lot of times it's the people that read them read so many, it's so much more enjoyable to read a woven theme, a well-written with no punctuation problems and no grammatical errors. Try to write it thinking about that.
Awesome.
And so I'll go back over to the thank you for the question, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you guys for your answers.
Is there a shelf life in terms of how long undergraduate courses can be used to satisfy prerequisites? Not really. If you've completed them, you've completed them. There is a shelf life to the MCAT. Your MCAT needs to be within the most recent 3 years. But we understand that some students take a non-traditional path to medicine. And so some people actually go off and have a career in business, and they have the prerequisites, from their undergrad by chance, and then they come back. So no, there is not an expiration on your prerequisites, but your MCAT needs to be within 3 years. So if you feel like you're kind of dusty on your prereqs, you want to make sure that you prepare for your MCAT in a responsible and an appropriate manner.
Emily had a really good question here that we talk a lot about, Dr. Rankin. Should you project future hours for activities on the application? If so, how do you recommend doing this? And this sort of fits in with my wait until your application is as good as it can be before you hit enter. And this is why. Let's say last spring you got a job to be a full-time scribe working 40 hours a week, and you had only done it for a week when you hit enter. Well, that's great, but we can't really count anything that's projected because it hasn't happened yet. So while it's okay if there's, we want you to keep doing things that are on your application during the year, but don't have all of your biggest things be projected, because it just doesn't hold the same weight than if you've done them.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better. Projected hours are okay, but we want to see actual experiences because those simply carry more weight.
Dr. Rankin, there's a good question for you. How do we view applicants with and without a gap year?
Again, there are many, many paths to medicine, and having a gap year does not add or degrade or take away from your application, especially if you've done something in that gap year to enhance your candidacy for medical school. If you take a gap year and you just simply go skiing and traveling, well, you had better speak pretty well to the diverse cultures and the experiences that you had there, because while that can definitely add to your mental and physical well-being, how does that add to your candidacy for being a physician? And so you just have to be able to speak to that. So we do not view gap years as a negative. And I think the majority of medical schools, I would say, take that approach. It's just, what did you do with that time that adds to your candidacy?
Yep, and I think about 40% of our incoming students have a gap year. Dr. Rankin, you talk about this a lot. Can you talk about the changes that will happen with step 1 becoming pass-fail? And are there going to be modifications to the curriculum? And if so, what would those be?
So I think there are always modifications to our curriculum, and it's not in response to teaching to step 1. Our students traditionally have always done well above the average. And so very proud of that. And so in terms of curricular changes because of step 1 going pass fail, I think there may be some adjustments in like the time allotted maybe for step 2, since that's still associated with a numerical score. But our curricular content changes are based upon feedback from students, based upon our need to add more curriculum talking about healthcare disparities and social injustices within medicine. So that's where our curricular changes go. We've never been an institution to teach to the exam. The way that we organize our curriculum, you have buckets of knowledge. You learn about renal, you learn about IND, you learn about cardiac, and then you pour it all together and you stir it up, and then you have all the knowledge that you need. And so all of that knowledge is tested on step 1, but we're not teaching to the exam, if that makes sense. So I do think it is going to have some downstream consequences in terms of programs. So prior to becoming prior to being dean, I was in charge of the anesthesiology residency program. So I was responsible for looking at the various scores in med school. And so I think programs may now actually be looking more so at step 2. They may add more weight to step 2, which still has a numerical value associated with it to kind of further delineate. So I don't think it's going to change the curriculum. I think the changes will be felt in terms of matching into a residency program potentially, which is beyond the scope of our talk here, but yeah.
Here's one. Do you accept letters of recommendation that are co-signed by 2 authors? For example, one letter co-signed by a PI and a postdoc advisor in the same lab. Yeah, why? I mean, then that's 2 people that know you really well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You want to make sure the people that you're asking to write letters know you well. And I know with a big school like Ohio State, that's not always easy. You know, you may have taken OChem with 200 people, but you want to find people that know you well and can speak to you and about you as a person.
I think Christine, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did earlier. Actually, you answered my question very well. I'm applying as a non-traditional sort of career changer. So I satisfied all of the prerequisite course requirements a long time ago, like 10 years ago. But I recently did take the MCAT, and the score obviously shows I know my like chemistry, physics, and all that stuff. So I just wanted to know if I had to take those classes again, just to have a newer grade, so to speak.
Yeah, so perfect. So we answered that. Perfect.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Christine. Someone is fluent in Spanish and would like to know if there's a longitudinal medical Spanish track. There are certainly opportunities to expand and use your medical Spanish, especially as an advanced competency. Those are kind of like in the latter portion of the curriculum, part 3, which is like Med 4. So there's certainly an opportunity to do that. But students, if they want to take undergraduate courses in Spanish, you can, because we're on campus. And so you have that ability to tap into that resource. So yes, speaking a second language is an awesome skill, including sign language.
Yes, very much so. Wanting to double check, does the MD program accept international students? Our MD program does not. We accept permanent residents, political asylees, DACA, but at this time, not international. Here was a good one about the MCAT. If you have an MCAT score, but also list a future, a future MCAT date when you submit to AMCAS, but later decide you don't need to take the future date, would we just personally notify Ohio State asking to be reviewed and to not expect a second score? This is kind of a sticky wicket, and it's hard to understand as an applicant, but that would absolutely be no problem. The problem would be more, let's say you had a so-so MCAT score and you were going to submit in June and you're going to retake the MCAT in September. When we get your application, we're not going to set it aside necessarily and then come back in September. You can't count on schools to do that. So it would be fine for you to change your mind. We're not going to never look at it because, oh, you know, Phaedra never took that second MCAT she said she was going to take. But you just don't want to leave anything up to communication with the school outside of the application cycle. We allow you to send updates to us, but the fact is that PDF of your update is not with your electronic application. So you don't want to count on that to get your best things across. Now, heck, if you got a 4-point, you got an award, absolutely let us know, but don't leave that super important stuff like those post-bac grades I mentioned for a later time.
Patel, you had your hand up.
Hi, Dr. Rankin and Ms. Brim. Hope you're both doing well. I was hoping to ask about patient advocacy, and I was wondering about how students specifically in the LSI curriculum are taught about patient advocacy. And then I would love to also hear more about how students are placed into the longitudinal clinics.
Advocacy is something that is just woven into the curriculum, because this is why we're here. We're not here for ourselves. We're here to advocate and take care of patients. And so political advocacy is a little bit different. If you want to be like advocating for changes in bills and things, we definitely have student interest groups which kind of take on that layer of advocacy. But I would say advocacy is woven throughout the curriculum, and it is an intangible that is present. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question very well, but in terms of how that even applies to our longitudinal practices, so that is a part of the curriculum that our students are involved in. And even within that, all students are assigned a project where they have to go into let's say a free clinic, and they have to figure out what are some opportunities for improvement in the function of the place, which in turn speaks to advocating for that particular location. Whether it's because this particular group of patients are having difficulty with getting access to Medicaid resources. What can we do structurally to improve the flow of patients? And so that is advocacy there. So how students are assigned to longitudinal practice, students' input is solicited, and then we go from there. And students usually get what they want. We have 5 minutes left, and you guys are asking some fantastic questions.
There was a good one here about MD, PhD. Is there a limit to how many PhD programs I can apply to? And if you mean within, and let me look up, I was just going to pull this up. If you mean within our MD, PhD, yes, you can just pick 2 areas to apply to. We've actually changed that for this year. Previously, people could pick everyone, biomedical science and then all the 6 or 7 areas. But this year we are limiting it to just 2.
I think Apana or Adriana, were you? I'm not sure who was first.
Oh, hello. Yes, I think I raised my hand first, but
okay, go for it.
Thank you. I just would like a bit of clarification, if I may, about the application and the MCAT. So I'm taking my MCAT in late June. And so, of course, I'll be receiving the score back in late July. And I was wondering about the primary application and submitting it. I just want to make sure that, so I should submit it only at the beginning of July so that it meets up with the MCAT score that comes back. Is that correct?
Well, let me give you a little bit of strategy.
Okay.
If there is a school, for example, let's say if there's a school that does not require you to have your MCAT to apply, what some people will do is apply at the very beginning and apply to one school. Because what happens then they start verifying your application. That takes about 4 weeks. And then everything is ready when you get your MCAT score back. So you just don't want to wait until you get your MCAT score back to apply, because then you've delayed it for 4 weeks, because it takes AMCAS 4 weeks before they actually send it out. So you can time them to come together, but you need to pay attention. Like, for example, like I said before with Ohio State, you have to have an MCAT for us to send you a secondary. So you don't want to send us your completed application. You don't want to click that Ohio State button until you have your score back. So you can be a little strategic about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with hitting enter for one school to get everything going, and then you can shoot things off from that, if that makes sense. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes.
I see there's a question about reapplication. I think we kind of talked about that. In terms of acceptance rates for reapplicants, I actually don't think that we've looked that closely, because we just consider you for the application cycle that you're applying. And if you happen to be a reapplicant, we certainly will look at, well, what has changed since the last time? Because understand that there are more students applying to be in medical school than there are positions. And so while we talk about changing something and being honest and receptive to that feedback, it may be that you just simply didn't get in because there's just simply not enough spots. So just be honest with and receive the feedback that you get from there. Apana, last name is Apana, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rankin. I was wondering if you could talk about financial aid and the scholarship process, about how often or frequent merit scholarships are given and financial aid is given.
First of all, medical school is thank you for that question. Medical school is very expensive. The students that are applying are simply outstanding. And to be completely honest, there's not enough scholarship dollars to go around. However, we do have scholarships, and all students are considered for scholarships. You do not have to apply for scholarships at our institution once you have been offered acceptance. And in addition to scholarships, there are some need-based dollars that we're able to award from the state of Ohio and within the institution. But I guess my short answer is there's never enough money to go around. At least I would love to make it rain for everybody, but it just doesn't happen that way. But you don't have to apply. And you know, we take into consideration multiple factors. We take into consideration how well you've done, because we do believe that there is validity in awarding how merit. But merit, because we use holistic review, merit is not the only thing that is considered. So it's all of those things, your experiences, your attributes, and your metrics, which inform how we award our scholarships. It's not purely metric per se, because you're not purely lit in by metrics, if that makes sense.
A great question. Do we fill out the FAFSA for medical school? Yes.
Yes.
FAFSA, just like you did for college. So you thought you were done after doing it 4 times or 5 times, you're not. Keep doing it. But the good news is you can go back. Let's say you decided to apply to 2 or 3 different medical schools. You can go back and attach it to those schools. So yes, absolutely. Keep going with that FAFSA.
All right. Unfortunately, we did not get to all of the questions. You guys have been fantastic, and it's been a very lovely time with you guys on this afternoon. This session was recorded, so if you need to go back and watch it again, please do so. Check out our website too. It has a lot of really good information there. Spend some time there, explore the primary care track, explore the MSTP. Our calendars are frequently updated. Usually you can find what you're looking for there. If for some reason you don't find what you're looking for there, please do not hesitate to reach out to the admissions office, and we'd love to help you. Again, we're not going to ask specific questions, answer like, am I going to get in? Well, we can't answer that question, so please don't send that. But if you truly have questions after visiting our website that just can't be answered, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Have a fantastic rest of your day or morning, depending on time zone, and take care. It's been very nice meeting with you guys.